That works.
Takes a gentle touch, all right.
Forgive the technical challenge. Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. First item on the agenda is review and approval of the minutes from the last meeting. If anybody has any additional comments they'd like to share, please do so. Otherwise, I would look for a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
Have a motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That would take care of our minutes. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. This is a comp plan amendment for the Thompson addition. Do you have anything you'd like to share, sir, before we open up the public meeting?
Well, I think, in your package, you've got a number of different items. You've got staff reports and things like that, and if you'd like to, we can run through those first. Brad, I don't know if you want to run through those first, or if you want to do the public input part of it first.
Yeah, why don't, I think for everyone's benefit, before we get into public input, I can kind of do a high-level overview of the project. And I believe the applicant has representation here. I think it would be good to hear from them what their proposal and the intent of their proposal is and what they want to achieve by it. And then I think it would be appropriate after that to conduct a public hearing and have any questions that you have for myself or the applicant. So if that works for you, I will just dive in and do a quick overview of the staff report.
Yeah, that sounds good, Brad.
All right, I'm going to share my screen real quick. Can you all see the page that has the location of the project?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to give you just a little bit of a history of this. Some of you obviously may know it even a little bit better than me because it started before we started really doing a lot of work with you on these planning staff reports and projects. This project was brought forth by Mr. Thompson, Planning Commissioner Thompson, as part of his development arm, and it was originally brought forth back in 2018, went through a number of different iterations, but essentially included a preliminary and final plat, as well as a planned unit development. And at that time, I think there was a comprehensive plan. We had just completed the comprehensive plan, and I think it was recognized that there needed to be an amendment, but that actual amendment to the comprehensive plan never occurred. So it received, in terms of an initial phase, which included everything but the apartment building or the multifamily building that's the subject of today's phase. It included the townhomes, the planned unit development for the townhomes, and the platting that essentially enabled those townhomes to move forward with. And I believe there are two of the buildings, of two different 4-unit buildings where there are permits that are currently in play and being construction happening. And so a number of iterations occurred and changes occurred between 2018 and where we're at today. But what we're looking at today is really the amendment to that original PUD to enable the higher density component to the south to move forward. So there are a couple different actions we have to take here. Because the comprehensive plan amendment never occurred, that's the first thing we want to do. We want to get the comprehensive plan land use guidance in conformance with what was approved with the PUD, and then also in conformance with what they're proposing to do on the site. The project here you see is at the southwest corner of 16th and 5th Avenue. So it's adjacent to the schools, both the elementary and the middle school and across from the high school. And so the one thing I'll say about the comprehensive plan amendment, it does add value, if you will, to that site for higher density housing simply because it creates an opportunity for people to live in a variety of different housing types within walking distance to the school. And so there's a concentration there that certainly makes sense from a land use planning perspective. Yes, there are always concerns about traffic. I'm sure we will hear some concerns about traffic on the site. But the idea of creating a concentration of uses where people can walk to destinations that are close by and can choose to live there because they can walk is consistent with the overall intent and objectives of the comprehensive plan. So primarily for that reason, we support at the staff level amending the land use designation, which today is single-family residential, yellow here. And this red box extends a little bit further south than it should. It's really about a little less than 300 feet south of 16th Street, which really is just this yellow area. And we would amend that land use designation to brown, which is high-density residential, which is essentially a stacked vertical orientation of housing, but not just that, it can also be some attached side-by-side townhouse-type units. And when we look at the site overall, its overall density is approaching that 30 units per acre, which is consistent with the high-density residential. So that's the first action that we need to take, is amending the comprehensive plan. The second action is the rezoning aspect of it. As you recall, this was granted a conditional use permit, which allowed for a planned unit development. And it used to be that we processed planned unit developments by granting them a conditional use permit. We amended the zoning code so that the PUD process is actually a rezoning process. And so we see terms in the staff report about PUD flex district. That's because when we rezoned everything that had a conditional use permit for a PUD to that PUD flex. And so what we're doing now is amending that PUD, which if you, when you went through the staff report, that PUD essentially is for this component of the project, where you've got the townhomes and the single-family home here, so without the additional development on these two parcels. So we're amending that PUD for this plan, which includes 3 additional townhomes on the northeasterly parcel and an apartment building or multifamily stacked residential building on the south. And so this is a rezoning, if you will, from that flex district to revised PUD. So it's really just an amendment to the PUD, but because it's now being processed as a zoning district, we're calling it a rezoning. So if you have questions on that, let me know. But that's essentially what we're doing, rezoning to a PUD district, which is an amended existing PUD. So what are the categories and what are the things we look at when we talk through the amendment to this? We look at density, and again, the density is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The PUD allows you to mix or to deviate from lot area standards, and so we look at what are those lot area standards, and I should zoom into this for you so you can read it better. We look at the lot area standards, and we apply the standards from the most logical district to this, which would be an R3 district, which will allow both townhomes and higher density stacked vertical units. And this 1750 is actually not the right number here. It's a little bit difficult because of how the zoning code looks at lot area. When the zoning code looks at it, it says for the first 2 units you have 8,000 square feet, and then I think 1,500 for every unit above 2. But when you average the lot area out, essentially we're looking at a little bit smaller lot area for this project, about probably 30 to 40% smaller lot area for this project when you average out the units. And so they are deviating from the standard in the R3 district, which is permitted through the PUD. Another area that they're allowed to deviate are setbacks. And the proposed structure here does not meet the setbacks of the R3 district. They're a little bit closer in some cases, and they're a little bit further back in other cases. Because this is a corner lot, we have 2 front yard situations on 5th Avenue and on 16th Street. And so the PUD essentially establishes the setbacks for the project. We are allowed an 8-foot setback for the R3 district on side yards, and they do exceed that 8-foot setback on side yards. But it's more of the front setbacks that they begin to deviate from. Building height, because the project is using the grades on the site, they've got 1 story of parking that is sort of at grade or underground, and then 3 stories of residential above. And the zoning code allows for 3.5 or 45 feet, so I think they're pretty close to that. They might be a little bit higher, but for the most part, I think they're right on that building height standard. Parking is something that we're experiencing across every project, across all types of cities, suburban, rural, metro, where the desire to have fewer parking spaces per unit is kind of the norm these days. We know that we still need to have adequately parked on the site. We need to have parking available for the site. If we have a situation where we allow them to go for less parking spaces, then we often will say, can you show proof of parking to meet the standards? This particular site plan has no extra room for proof of parking, so if we allow a lower parking standard, which in this case, in theory, people that live here might be working at the schools, hopefully, people that live here work at the schools, and might have fewer cars, so they don't have to drive as much, but we know that that's not always real, and so if we have a situation where we have a parking problem, it becomes incumbent upon the owner of that property to begin to restrict the tenant's ability to have cars if they don't have parking for it. So that's a unique circumstance, but one that we have to recognize that if we grant this with fewer parking spaces, that's the reality of the situation. If we have a parking issue, they've got to manage it. Site has access for two different locations. When you look at their site plan, their access comes off of both 5th Avenue to the east. This will be for the underground parking that you have here. And then access also is onto 16th Street for a guest parking lot or an extra parking lot here. So they have two different access points. The majority of the trip generation will come out of here on the 5th Avenue. We know that that's a potential concern, primarily when we have peak school periods getting in and out, so we'll have to make sure we monitor that. We know that the overall capacity of the streets, this project won't exceed the capacity of those streets, and so the design for this kind of traffic, it's more of an issue of we have 3 schools in the same location that's going to create these peak periods. The peak periods for an apartment building like this or a townhouse building like this shouldn't line up exactly with peak periods for these schools, afternoon and morning sessions. So traffic shouldn't be something that is a problem because of this. It's more a problem because of those peak school facilities operations. Okay, what else? Let's see. Traffic, utilities, drainage. The applicant provided engineering plans back in 2020 when they made some amendments to the preliminary plat, and those engineer has looked at those comments, has provided comments on that. We will make sure that we have drainage and utility plans updated as part of this approval, as a condition of approval for the more detailed site plan process. The engineers have looked at it and they don't have major concerns with it, but that will be a condition of approval. They have not submitted a landscaping plan. Landscaping is one of the criteria in the planning and development that we look at, particularly when it comes to dealing with some of those smaller setback areas or if there are areas that require additional screening. Landscaping is an opportunity to create those buffers or to create that softening from a visual perspective. And so one of the things we'll require them to do is submit that landscaping plan as their site plan approvals happen, which happen at an administrative level. The one area that is a little tricky is the common open space. There's a little bit of history to this here. So when the original plans were approved, there was a condition of approval that said the applicant would retain 30% open space, which is a standard that's in the PUD standards in the zoning code. That standard was in the code prior to the recent updates to the code. It's a fairly common standard for planning and developments. And when we originally looked at this project, we're not sure that that 30% threshold is met. They provided an additional drawing, which is on the Dropbox side. I don't know if you've all had a chance to see it.
We've got paper copies here too, Brad.
Do you? Okay, so you can see on that drawing, and there's calculations. The one thing I'll point out is that the zoning code explicitly excludes setback areas. And so if you look at the code and say, okay, well, what's the setback? Because we allow deviation from the code, we have smaller setbacks than what the setback standard in the R1 district is. And when you look at the calculations they provided, I did some math, and essentially they're short on that 30% open space. It's not a huge number, but it's one that they are definitely a little bit short on, and we'll need to be a little creative on how we can make sure we hit that 30% open space threshold. That can be something where we also look at linking up the landscaping with that open space. In between that extra landscaping, can we get to that 30% open space area? So that's the one piece that I think is worthy of a lot of conversation today and direction from the Planning Commission. So that's kind of a high level, the review of this. Ultimately, what does the PUD ordinance look like? The PUD ordinance looks like a resolution with stipulation of what these deviations are. So for the lot area, for the setbacks, for the building height, for the parking standards, and then for acknowledging the open space if we have a condition of approval to get to that 30% open space requirement. And then it includes the site plan drawing, which is the C1A. So this becomes the PUD ordinance. Those two together become the ordinance that we follow for this project. So then every building permit would be looking at this plan and the resolution for their approvals. Now I do note that the open space drawing that was submitted has a little bit of a different footprint than what you see on this drawing. And so we'll want to make sure that those footprints align with the actual project. They've provided some renderings just to give an idea. I don't know that this will be the exact project they get built, but this helps you see kind of the character, if you will, of the architecture. It also shows on Fifth Avenue the kind of topography that shows the underground parking or that first level parking. So you can see it's buried to some extent when you look at the elevation on the westerly side of it. You see 3 stories of residential, which I think is good because as you step to the west, you approach that single-family residential neighborhood to the west, so that helps with that. So I think what I'll do is pause there. The applicant has provided a narrative. I think it's important for you to hear from them and kind of what they're striving to achieve from a market perspective. And so with that, I think I would pause, and if the chair is okay with that, I would ask maybe the applicant to speak to the project. And I think there's a representative there to speak to it for him.
By all means, but before we do, does anybody have any questions for Brad? If not, who is here speaking on behalf of the development? Do you have any comments you wanted to share with us, sir, before the public hearing?
Absolutely. Would you like me up?
If you'd be so kind, and if you'd be kind enough to give us your name.
I'm Jamie Judish with 504 Ventures. I've got to get that right. Really, our intent with this is the unique location, the topography, everything. It yields itself so perfectly to a higher density project. We've done quite a few multifamily projects around in Rochester, but I think our most relevant one to this is the 301 main building in Pine Island that's downtown and also located right next to the school. We're just a block, is it a block off the school?
And the library, and the
Yeah.
fire hall,
So,
and the city hall.
so I think a lot of the concerns that people have, we can kind of look to that building and how it's performed over the last 3.5 years for some guidance, and would be very happy to have you speak to with the city and the city administrator, because really, most of the main concerns we had were parking around the building, what happened when people were leaving to go to work, all of those things. That's a building that's 3 stories over underground parking, very similar in nature to what we're proposing. The 3/1 yields 1 parking spot per apartment on average, which usually is sufficient. Because of those concerns in Pine Island, we had a 1-to-1 parking ratio. We ended up with 2 or 3 surface spots. We have some parking around the building, and then the city owns a lot right across the street to the north. And they insisted that we had 8 spots reserved there. They just came back to us and asked if we were okay with removing the reservations on those spots because they're so seldomly used. Parking in the area really hasn't changed. Traffic flows haven't changed despite dropping 36 units of density. right in there downtown on the main corridor to get into the school. Well, it doesn't seem logical, but the end result on almost all of these buildings, whether they're in Rochester or not, is that they tend to be big and quiet, and you rarely see a mass exodus or anything of that nature. In Casson, looking at what we expect for a tenant mix, we're certainly hoping, especially given the cost of housing right now, we're hoping that some of the younger faculty in the schools and people nearby can take advantage, because hopefully the rents will still be affordable to younger professionals. But we'd also expect to have probably a majority of older residents that want to stay in town and have the freedom to travel or downsize from bigger properties. When we did our market research in Pine Island, we figured we'd have about a third, maybe a little more than a third of seniors. We could have filled the building twice. It really surprised us. I think it caught us off guard how high the demand was in that age range. And that's probably the same here, but given the proximity to the school, we're hoping for more of a mix, especially hearing how difficult it is for young staff to find housing anywhere nearby. And Casson's amazing in terms of how many lots are coming online, it looks like this year and next. But a lot of that housing is unattainable for people starting out and even people that have been in for a while, just given the price point. So our intent would be to bring a Class A building. The final version of it will be dependent on what the approvals would be. So we're thinking mid-30s for the total number of units, maybe 34 as a placeholder, somewhere around 1,000 square feet, and just very nicely appointed in-unit laundry. We think that one of the biggest amenities for the building is its physical location, and having that ability, and our Pine Island one is sort of similar this way, we don't need a lot of space necessarily around the building because it's right on a path, it's right next to the schools. It's just a phenomenal location for people that actually want to get out and do things in the community, because so many community events are tied into that area. So there's still space, you can go walk your dog, you can walk around the development, but then right out the bottom door there is the trail, and you have access then to so many great parts of town within 3-4 minutes of walking. So, parking, surface parking, Aaron, do you recall how many spots? I apologize, I forgot to count that out.
I thought it was 1.5.
I think we get really close to 1.5 to 1. From experience, we're not gonna need it, but it's really nice to have it, and we totally understand that if somehow we're wrong, if parking becomes a major issue, then that's up to us to control, but we just don't see it. People coming to us in Pine Island said, we're a 2-car family, we're always gonna be a 2-car family, I need 2 spots in that building. I don't know that more than one time we've ever actually had every spot under the building full. There's usually 1 or 2 spots that have no takers. And again, traffic patterns, visitation, everything else just hasn't been an issue. So from our experience, if we can have 1.5 to 1, I feel very confident that we won't cause any problems and it won't cause any hardships for us or our residents at that ratio. Other than that, Brad hit on an awful lot, which was very helpful. What other areas, so I'm not just repeating myself, would you like us to explore at this point? Is there any questions I can answer, anything to touch on specifically? What's the best use of your time?
Well, I mean, the green space is gonna be something that has to get figured out. I think that'll be an issue, and stormwater management, maybe you could talk about that a little bit too. And I know Dan had mentioned that he had some questions about height. And I know that Brad referenced it here, he thinks that it'd be a little high. So I don't know, Brad, if there's anything else we have to do with height, but,
Because you got residential there that are concerned over the height already.
sure.
And
I
if
know
you
might
go
have got
over
some-
the threshold.
We have talked to you about that, and so that is an issue too. So I don't know, maybe you could address those.
So height, we would be hoping we could do a pitched roof, just because it tends to blend in better. That also, though, gives us a higher roof line. Generally speaking, we get to count the building height as an average between the eaves and the peak, but that's subject to the rules of each municipality. So we'd be hoping for that, but the main level should be pretty close to grade. On average, the buildings are about 11 feet per story plus, so really the top wall of our unit should be 35 feet roughly above grade around it, plus the pitch roof. And we don't have to do a pitch roof. A flat roof can be done, which will lower the overall view. It's just, it tends not to be as attractive. But that's subjective, I guess. I don't think it's as attractive. I think the buildings with the pitch roofs blend in better. I'm sorry, what was our other one? It was...
Stormwater
Yeah,
management, green space.
Let me just add that the building height for the R3 district is 45 feet or 3.5 stories. So what he's described is very close to that, if not within that range. So I think he's probably fine, he'll be consistent with that. The concern about height though from the neighbors, I mean, that's a different concern, and the question is, are there other things that we can do from a landscaping standard to soften or kind of offset that scale issue? I think that's a little more understand what the concern is about height.
Yeah, well, and I think that the building, the massing of the building will be largely masked by some of the development around it. You will see the height from Fifth, because you'll see the lower level as well. And depending where the final elevations would come out, that's one of the neat spots, or one of the neat characteristics of this site, is we can drive basically straight in without having a miserable blind drive that so many of these buildings create. And so knowing that we're coming in on a road where there is pedestrian traffic, there are children, it should be a long view corridor in to see for cars that are going in and out of the underground parking. And then looking from the south to the north, I believe that we have somewhat of a berm that will remain, which should also help lessen the feel of density there. But until we know what our final elevations are, I can't get too specific.
The soccer field is 8 feet above the grade, so the soccer field almost buries the whole first floor.
Well, that's part of the issue though, because of course on the west side it's higher, on the east side it's a lot lower, but...
Yeah, but the site, I think the site would be graded fairly level.
Sure, no, I'm just saying, I think it creates an even greater illusion of height from the street. You know what I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
you're right, from where the ground level up, it's not quite as bad, but if I'm driving along,
Yeah.
you're gonna see this building that's 4+ stories high because you got the extra 10 feet of
Yeah.
dirt, so.
Yeah, and that's where architecture comes into play.
Sure.
You know, if we make it just a big, ugly, vinyl cladded slab, that's one thing. If we take the time, pick good materials, first of all, we've never done a building like that, and we don't intend to start now. So usually we do a mix. We love doing all brick when that was in the budget. Unfortunately, those days are behind us. But LP and hardy board make for some very attractive finishes that are highly durable, that should last as long or longer than most of us in this room. So that's the direction that we intend to go. Stormwater management, we know that's going to be an issue. We know that's going to be a requirement. We believe that we have kind of a ballpark idea for how we can handle it. On some infill projects that we've done in the past, we ended up running oversized piping underground and had that step down before it connected to the street, basically functioning as a holding tank. And that's, I think, the likely way that we will solve this as well. But until we can turn the engineers loose on it, we don't know that answer for sure, other than we totally understand it's a condition that has to be met.
Sure. Okay. I think those are the biggest things that I've heard from people, so.
Yeah, and obviously the site with the students going past that.
Sure, well, I mean, we can get into that as part of the public hearing,
Yes.
but yeah, just in terms of questions before we move on to that component.
Just one comment though, I mean, you had brought up the Pine Island. So I go past the building every day, twice a day. That building, there's no traffic for the school going past the building, because all the traffic is a block to the south. It comes out past the fire department. That's where you'll have student traffic there, but there's hardly any cars, because they traffic them all to the south. So they come past the fire hall.
That
That's all
isn't
the
quite
buses.
correct, because we have a lot of traffic that goes along the north side of the building.
Very minimal compared to the south, which is a
Possibly.
full block.
But where we found out it was such a major problem was during construction, and there were some days that the trucks weren't coordinated properly with the school schedule, and the number of calls that flooded the city administrator at the time for why we were blocking the main route in for parents. I can't speak to school buses, because I don't know which way they go.
They've rerouted since to the south for the fact that
Okay.
the south is a four-way stop, the north is no longer. It's just two-way. So they've rerouted the traffic a block south. So there's a lot less traffic past that building than you'll see at this building.
And I haven't been there now in the last few months. Do we still have crossing guards in front, or did they change that recently?
They still just do them on the south.
Okay, because we had crossing traffic and everything on the north, at the main intersection on the north, west corner there with City Hall.
They go all the way past, down by the fire hall where.
Okay, they may have changed, but we've been there for 4 years, at least, and, people had these horrible concerns of what it was going to do, and I think the end result is that it's just kind of a big, quiet building that hasn't caused the problems that everyone assumed it was going to create. And the other ones downtown that we've done in Rochester and around have been the same way. But, again, it doesn't make sense logically when you think, how do you put that much density in and not change traffic flows? But
Oh, you're gonna.
But the end result is that it tends to be very, very minor as opposed to what people envision.
Anything else? No? Thank you, sir. I
Yeah,
appreciate
and if you have any
your comments.
questions, we're here, so.
Did everybody see the email we got from Ms. Brown as a part of our public hearing? Yep, okay. With that said, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. If anybody has any thoughts they would like to share, if they'd be kind enough to come up to the podium and start with your name and your address, if you would, please, sir.
My name is Mark Murphy, I live at 1502 Second Avenue Circle Northeast, which is adjacent to the property that we're talking about, half a block. I'm here representing all the residents of that Second Avenue Circle, and I've talked to some on First Avenue Circle as well. We're adamantly against this. It's my understanding it's going to be 34 units plus 15 townhomes, is that right? Am I reading this right?
Okay.
Plus, the home that's still there is going to be left there. All I can say is we're where the hell are people going to park? The traffic, I challenge everyone member there to go out to school every morning and twice a week, once in the morning, once in the evening, and look at the traffic. The traffic on Fifth Avenue, the parents coming in to get their kids, is backed up to almost a softball field. The school buses can't get out because of traffic coming around 16th Street Northeast. They're blocking there. School buses can't get out. You got kids walking everywhere. You're gonna add approximately 42 cars. If you're using 1.5 as a number for cars for that, plus 15 townhomes times 2, there's another 30. Again, where are these people gonna park? The traffic congestion's gonna be unreal. I can't see how this can be a positive effect for anybody. The traffic, some kids run over, hit by a car, no, that would be their fault, but kids are kids. And the school buses right now still can't get out the way it is. And if you increase the traffic, minutely, it's going to jam it up even further. I live Second Avenue Circle, the traffic on 16th Street backs up just short of our driveway every evening. If parents turn to go down 16th or Fifth Avenue, they only get about 4 or 5 on Fifth Avenue, they wait to turn to the driveway. They can't get there because they're plugged up the roadway. Now, if you can explain to me how the traffic can be not affected by about 40 more cars plus 15 townhomes, another 30 cars. You're talking about someone in the neighborhood of 80 cars in that little area, increase, and you have traffic jams already. And kids are having to push the button and to get across the road. Most parents and people going through there are respectful. They're all respectful, but sometimes they don't see the button, they don't see a light, and it comes close. To increase that traffic, to me, is just totally unrealistic. Now, I know that they're talking about ways to the Pine Island. You've heard where those schools are. You got the elementary school here, high school here, middle school here. You got all 3 schools right on top of one another, and you're trying to put another people in the middle of it. Now, I'm not against building an apartment complex, I'm not. I'm just against this location, because of the traffic and the kids' concerns. Plus, we had, plus the 15 townhomes, personally, I don't know where we'll put, is there gonna be any space left for recreation for these people that own these properties? The townhomes that are there right now that they're building are backed up, within 6 or 8 feet of the property line, and it's just, plus you have about 15 more, and I'm taking for granted there's gonna be, like there's 2 units in the building, so you'll have at least 5 more buildings of townhomes, plus the 34-unit apartment complex. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to see how the heck this can work and be positive for anybody. I just don't. Not a person on Second Avenue Circle is in favor of it, and I talked to them all. Now, I'm going to back up on one. The police officer that's there, I didn't even ask him, because they didn't want to get him in the bottom of the city over this. Also, the principal, I didn't ask him because of the school. I just left him out of it for, didn't have any political or whatever repercussions. But I've not talked to anyone that is in favor of this. Now, I understand we need to build more housing in Casa, I do. But my taxes have also gone up in the last 10 years, almost $2,000. Started off at $2,000 and they're over $4,000. Now, somebody's going to question me on this, but every time something like this gets built, our taxes have to go up to help cover it in some form, whether it be city services or whatever. But I'm not saying I'm ranting rave all night, but we're very much against it, just because of that. Some place where there's not as much traffic, past the bridge, you're on 16th Street, going past the bridge, out just on the other side of the bridge, going east, might be a good place for it. There's less traffic and more open area. Anybody have any questions for me? I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Aaron Thompson. I live on the property that is being developed, and I am, so that address is 504 16th Street Northeast. And I am also a part of the development, but I'm speaking as a public citizen who lives on that corner, who every day gets out and looks at the traffic. I'm either looking at the traffic out my window or when I'm leaving, and I have to say there's never been a time that, there's very seldom a time that I have to wait very long to get out of my driveway. I do understand adding more cars, there's going to be that, but with the amount of students that get dropped off and the amount of lots that are being brought in, we're going to increase that traffic a lot, just more and more students. So adding, the units that are there, yeah, it's going to have a direct impact right there, but more and more students. I do have a question. There is going to be some traffic adjustments on that corner. Is that correct, Tim? Coming in? Is that happening, or is that not?
Not sure what you mean by traffic.
Where they were going to modify they did a traffic study on 16th Street where they modified it. Is that sure
I
coming?
mean, I guess I don't know what traffic will necessarily be modified, but the corner will be modified.
The corner,
as,
yeah.
It'll be redesigned.
Yeah, so the corner is going to be redesigned so that it'll be much safer for students to be able to be crossing, and the traffic is going to be adjusted, whether this development goes in or not, from that standpoint. I've lived close to the schools before, and I live really close now, and that was one of the reasons that we looked at this development as a great location for, starter homes for people. I know we've got apartments that are going to be coming in on other locations, and those kids are nowhere near the school. This whole group of affordable housing and the apartment, all of these kids are going to be very close. And talking about local area, I see so many people enjoying all of the trails everybody out walking around, playing in the ball fields, that when I looked at a place of, you know, if you're gonna put some high density, wouldn't you wanna put it around where there's the most parks possible? You know, there's 2 softball diamonds, a baseball diamond, you know, amazing how many people use that football field for anything and everything. And, that doesn't even account for all the trails that are going through there. So I just wanted to share those items, and, you know, I definitely am a little biased for the project, but, do see all the benefits that go along with that area.
Anyone else like to share something? If not, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you both. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
Well, first, I just have a couple things for housekeeping purposes. There are a couple different changes we're looking at. So, one would be that comprehensive plan amendment, so that would be something we would make a recommendation on. And then it would be the PUD amendment for the Thompson subdivision in itself, which is kind of what you've got here. I mean, I hate to bring this up, but, you know, and Brad, you've got it kind of alluded to in your report, there was an issue with a power component. I have a concern with those 3 townhomes on the northeast corner, how that would work with the easement that apparently exists in that corner, and I mean, I do think we probably have to talk about that a little bit before we'd do anything with that. I don't know, Brad, if that seems relevant.
I would say that's relevant to certainly to their current site plan. If anything, I guess I don't know enough details about it, but it affects it affects 3 townhomes that they proposed, on that northeast lot. And so, I don't know if, Jamie, if you have more insight on that. I think you mentioned to me that there may be a solution for it.
I can allude to that, Brad. So, we are working with Excel to resolve any concerns. And at the last conversation we had is, I am sending them the building plans for those 3 units, so they can make sure that their engineering department takes those into consideration with whatever remedy they are going to be proposing. So it does not seem to be a concern at the moment. Ultimately, if they come back, you know, it is their easement, but it is the 504 Development's property. So, you know, ultimately, if we want the easement back, we can work through that, and they would, you know, do what they need to modify that. But at this point, sounds like, you know, the concern with the first building has already been figured out, and they are working on a remedy, so.
Can I ask a question?
We entertaining questions?
About the power.
It's up to you. I'll answer questions.
Are you comfortable answering
Yeah, I
questions?
can answer any questions.
Your question, sir?
Okay, you're talking about the power. When they first started that, they had to dig under my fence, because I got a big electric box in my yard.
Those aren't power lines. That's the first thing people need to understand. Those are transmission and generation lines, so they are not tied into any power.
I guess my question then is, whatever they are, I gotta do a bunch more digging in my yard to this property.
I would have to wait for their solution, and then I can answer that question.
Driven more so by the utility than anybody here, sir.
Okay, the reason I ask, I want to put a garage back there, and I can't do it, if they're gonna do a bunch of digging. So, I'll just stay in touch with you.
Well, again, that's largely driven by the utilities, sir, nobody here, just for your benefit.
That's Excel Energy, not
Yeah, that
not the
actually
city.
has
Has nothing to do with
us,
the
but,
city, yes,
yeah.
yeah, so.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
So we have that easement, you guys have a map of that easement now, correct?
See that?
Terry?
Yes, we do.
Why don't we drop that easement on the next site plan iteration so we see where it's at relative to the buildings you've got?
Okay.
And then the other question I would have would be the green space calcs. You know, Brad, you mentioned that you thought they might be a little short. When Linda took a look at it, she thought they might be a little short. And I think that maybe gets into what you're saying is setbacks. You know, I know that,
Correct.
Aaron did his calculation, and I'm not sure if he included some setback property in there or what that is, but that's something that has to be reconciled too, I think. And I mean, my thought was really initially was, what about killing two birds with one stone? If you eliminate one of those units of the three that's gonna be close to the power lines anyways, maybe it gives you a little bit more green space, and maybe that's something you could do, but that was just, I wasn't sure which number was really right. So that's something I think the planning commission probably needs to have a good handle on as well.
We don't have any of those details in front of us, it's hard to have the conversation.
Well, we got the numbers, what they're saying are the numbers on the back of that sheet there, but...
So if I'll ask a question of Brad, there's a 10-foot setback around the property, Brad?
There's, 8-foot side yard, 10-foot street side.
Okay. And those setbacks are not removed? The
So,
what- the-
so those setbacks are not allowed as part of the open space calculation.
Okay.
And so the setback areas are excluded from the open space calculation, so when you take those out, you're about 3,000 short of having 30% open space, 3,000 square feet
We would
short.
definitely be under at that point.
Okay.
It would be under. I guess the question comes about is, we're not showing any of the green space that goes up to the trail or a future, sidewalk from that standpoint. So there is a lot more green space on this
It
lot.
needs to be on your property.
No, I understand, yep,
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but.
yeah. No, I'm just saying that in there is more green space. I understand the calculation, so that would be a potential,
Correct.
request to review that.
This is a design detail, would it mean they move things around? Would it mean they possibly lose a building? It depends on their design and how they figure it out. But at the end of the day, what happened in the last time this was approved as a PUD was there was a condition that they submitted an open space plan that showed the 30%, and that open space plan was never, I believe, submitted, at least I've never seen it. This time around, before we issue any building permit for that apartment building, we would need to see that open space plan and how that 30% sits. And until we see that, until they've made that, adjustment to show how that works, they wouldn't be allowed to pull a permit for it. So we think that's a design detail. I would say if the planning commission could talk about that, and that could be a condition of approval, is that they, continue to work on their site plan and achieve that 30% open space, before it's approved. Same with utility line. I think we can have them just drop that utility easement on there, demonstrate they understand what that issue is and that they're working with, the utility company to know what the impact is.
Point of clarification, if we don't include the apartment building, does the 15 units in this area meet the high-density threshold for the comp plan amendment?
Really close.
The reason I'm asking is, we gotta do the step one first, and if
Yep.
that already meets the comp plan amendment, let's get that done and out of the way, then we can address all the other questions around the PUD.
I think
But-
they would be above that 12 unit per acre threshold,
But,
just barely.
but
So it
you're,
would still trigger the high density.
but you're saying that's as drawn, but if it falls into the utility easement and they have to change it, we would not wanna, then we would be under that threshold.
Well, if the threshold is 12 per acre,
I mean,
yeah, he's showing 15 here. So, that's what I'm trying to get at, is what is the minimum threshold for the number of units per acre? Because I'm trying to,
The comprehensive plan is, 12 units per acre and above is high density. Below that is medium density.
okay,
And this is, I can do the math here.
Well, just the townhomes in the house is 16, so
Yeah.
it's not too complicated math, but...
If I could interject something here, that, the original thought was all townhomes, and we ended up going with the apartment building so that we could split the traffic from all coming out one location to two locations. So ultimately, Mr. Burton, you know, whatever's gonna happen here is probably gonna need a comp use
Well,
adjustment,
that's,
so,
yeah, that's my point. Let's take care of the
Yeah.
comp plan
Yeah.
first. Get it off our, otherwise we'll spend all night talking about it and not get one of these things accomplished.
So are there any more comments specific to the comp plan amendment? Why don't we start the conversation there, or end it? No?
So it, the comp plan amendment would be to R3. So what?
To high-density
To high
That
residential.
density.
goes to high density.
Yeah. So the rezone comes after this, sir?
I just made
If I
And the
understand
comp
the...
plan, yeah,
if I
just to
understand
confirm,
the-
it would be high density even if you took one of those units out.
And the property is an acre and a half, is that right? Is that the
Somewhere
size?
A little over that.
Total site is 1.58 acres, and the multifamily structure at the south end is 0.59 acres.
So 12 units per acre would mean you need 18 units, correct? To achieve 12 units for the entire development?
Right, which is why I think, as maybe he was
Oh,
alluding to,
yeah, yeah.
even if they put townhomes in instead of the apartment, it would qualify.
It's still,
It would kick it
yeah.
into that next category up, right.
Townhomes in place of the apartment complex?
It would still be enough units, yeah.
Building
Correct.
space, sure.
If there's no more discussion, I would look for a, motion, please.
Since we've got design and building already started, I'll make a motion to approve the comp plan to R3 high-density residential.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aaron, you're gonna abstain?
I will abstain.
And I just want to make one little clarification. So Dwayne's motion was, to amend it to R3 high density. It's just amending it to high density residential. R3 is actual zoning, so it's just high density residential.
Thank you for that clarification, Brad.
I don't think you need to change your motion. The intent was there.
Thank you. That would be our recommendation for city council, sir.
Okay.
Next up, public hearing, PUD amendment for the Thompson addition. I think we've kind of started into this. Is there anything that needs to be added before we continue the discussion? By yourself?
You know, I think we've talked about a lot of the different, I mean, I brought up a lot of the different issues that I've seen with it, and, I mean, I think in a final design, before they, like Brad said before, when he put permits would be issued, we'd have to reconcile some of the concerns that are there, and, I mean, the easement's obviously one of the biggest ones, like, how's that gonna work, and then, I think from the perspective, I mean, really, what I'm hearing is traffic. It seems like the number one concern that people have is the number of cars on the streets, and I don't know what the best solution to that is. You have the comments there from the Browns, I think, as well. You know, I let her know that I would have that in the public record, so this will be part of our public record, our minutes too. And that was her biggest concern was traffic as well, so, I think from my perspective and staff perspective probably, and Brad, you can add anything else you'd like to. I do think there's a need for housing in Casson, and, you know, this could serve a potential purpose in that way.
I guess I would like to clarify one comment. I know that, just to be clear, I didn't want to misspeak. Certainly, traffic will be different, it will be more, but my point in talking about the traffic capacity of the roads were designed for the traffic capacity. The issue we have is, and every city has this, literally, where you have multiple schools in one place, is more about traffic management, as much, more so than the actual volume of traffic. And so that's something that's going to be continued to be worked on, whether this develops or not. You heard from the resident, there's already congestion, and it's an issue that needs to be resolved. So that point being said, it's not taken lightly here. We recognize that's a concern, and it's something that continually needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, traffic-wise, the biggest issue is the mornings. I mean, evenings, it's not gonna be as big of a deal because the kids are out by 3. Now, there's still sports and things like that, but that isn't as big of a problem. But that morning traffic between 7 and 8:30, or 7:30 and 8:30 is probably the biggest one. But I don't know if that, that's kind of up to you guys, what you think about it.
To the part of the traffic is it necessarily the traffic, is it the safety of the kids that everybody's concerned of that go past that street to go across to the elementary school or to the middle school? And I have kids, and anybody that has kids know that kids are gonna not pay attention to cars coming out there. So if we do it, we have to come up with a way that's gonna protect the kids and protect the drivers coming out of there. If it's an alert system coming out of the apartment, or an alert system on trails, something that's gonna get attention for the cars and the students.
There is length for a full vehicle to come out of that apartment.
Which, and I understand that, nothing against that.
Yeah.
I'm saying you have kids
Yeah.
that are in 5th grade that are not gonna pay attention. They don't now. I mean, if you pick up kids in the middle school parking lot, it's a royal pain, because the kids run wherever they want. They see their parents, they run. They don't see cars. You have the cars come in that stop, they don't park in the stalls, and then cars go around them because they're in a hurry. I mean, so you're gonna have more congestion coming out of that apartment with kids more than vehicles, and that's the biggest concern that I'm hearing, is that people are concerned about safety and how much expense is it gonna be to fix it, or alleviate, or slow it down, versus you're gonna, one accident. So that's the biggest concern, and I'm sure there's a way around it, but it's gonna be an expense for the apartment.
I have a question, it just relates to that, but and I haven't looked what the inside of your structure, garage parking floor plan, but is that one of the, Aaron, everybody, I think, is used to with their home garages. Is this a drive out? A lot of these that I've been in Arash, we drive in and we drive out.
Yeah, you drive in and out the same
Right,
location.
and I think everybody's thinking about everybody's stuck on this term of backing.
Yeah, there's no backing up
No.
out of there.
And that, I just wanted to clarify that for
Yeah.
myself. I was thinking that same
Oh.
thing,
No, even if they're driving out though, you're still gonna have that,
which is,
the kids are gonna be
right.
kids.
The car will be able to pull out, stop in front of the trail, and then ultimately, the trail goes across at that location from that standpoint, so.
Well,
And to be honest, there's very few kids that actually walk on that trail in the morning. They're all on the other side, because there's nobody who comes from any living space, from that side. I know that's, but it's just an interesting thing when I sit there and watch where everybody's walking and what's going on, is they're walking on the side where the elementary school is.
Sure, and I mean, I live in
Because
that area of town too, and I know, you know that area, and I do see, there are a lot of people who use it at different times of the day.
Oh, yeah.
But,
yeah.
The biggest concern obviously would be that early morning and evening time when people are coming home, so.
Because you'll have the kids that won't cross where they're supposed to get to the elementary school too. I mean, you can work with kids as much as you want, but...
Yeah,
Just look at all the green look at all the trails that go across grass, you'll find out
That's
where
why there's more trails going in.
Oh, but you've got a sidewalk from this development south to
Yep.
the middle school.
Yep.
So I would assume that really isn't a major concern. And what is going on at the intersection here at 5th and 16th in terms of the safe pathway to school, I guess?
Well, they're redesigning that corner, so it's gonna be a little bit better for the kids can get out, they should be more visible, and then the buses will hopefully be able to make that turn. So, I know that the Public Works Department is working on that project, we'll be constructing that this year.
How are they gonna I gotta interrupt. How are they gonna improve that intersection to account for all the traffic?
For the addition, I don't think it needs to be improved to handle additional traffic, does it? It just needs to be improved from a safety standpoint, if I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this was, whether Aaron does his project or the Judishes do their project or not, I think that Safe Routes to School has been in the works for,
5 years.
I don't know, at least 5
Where
years,
about
wouldn't you think, Dwayne?
2017 is...
Sir?
If I may, Castle's gonna go through a lot of growth, whether this one goes through or not, but we're very happy to work with you, short-term and long-term, with whatever that looks like. And on other projects, things have been explored,
where certain times of day, people leaving can only do right-hand turns, or there are a lot of ways that this could be looked at, and long story short, I mean, we're open to working with the city to help alleviate any issues, should we find them as they arise.
Yeah, one thing I do want to highlight from the Brown's email, she mentioned, folks cutting through, Second Avenue Circle Northeast and that sort of thing. I do think as part of that preliminary plat, I believe there was a sidewalk that's gonna be on the north side too, isn't there, Aaron, through your subdivision?
Yeah, there'll be a dead-end sidewalk, which...
Well, I mean, the nice thing to note is though that, you know, in the fullness of time, that sidewalk will be extended. I mean, that's part of the plan, just like they're gonna be extending that sidewalk on the north side of 11th. You know, right now by the ice arena you've got on the south side, they're gonna be extending that trail on the north side as well out to 57. In the fullness of time, and there's right of way to build it out to where the new roundabout will be at 57 and 16th. So, I mean, I think the goal would be to provide sidewalk along there too, so that the kids that, you know, you can't stop kids from cutting through the yards like
No.
folks have said, but if, I mean, we're giving them every opportunity to have a safe way to walk on both sides of the street.
I think what Mrs. Brown is talking about is, kids have to walk to an intersection to be able to cross, and nobody wants to walk to an intersection.
Sure.
And they end up walking across their own intersection where there isn't a safety crossing walk area.
Sure.
Public hearing?
Yeah, I think you got a short one for this one too.
Yep. There is a second public hearing on the agenda this evening specifically for the PUD amendment for the Thompson addition. If there are any additional comments that want to be shared, if we can keep it specific to the PUD amendment, I would appreciate it. So with that said, I'll open the public hearing if there's any comments specific to it.
Very brief.
I knew that
And
one.
then they come.
Jamie Judish again with 504 Ventures. As far as the green space, we'll see what our options are. We're open to working on it, that's fine. If we're really, really close, we may request a variance if that's something that will be entertained. But I think one way or another, we can get there. We're not, I don't think, too far today. So just some tweaking and see what it takes. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm not exactly sure what your PUD amendment is. All I want to say is that they have to build 15 townhomes, plus an apartment complex for 34. How can you get enough green space in there to have anything to look right and be good for the community, plus the increased traffic? I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I just don't see it. The townhomes is one thing, but that 34-unit apartment complex is something else. Personally, I think I could talk to my community into Elizabeth being allowing the townhomes, but I'm going to go to talking being in favor of the apartment complex. Because 15 plus a complex plus that house is already there, where are you going to put it? I mean that sincerely. How is that? No, thank you.
Unless there's any additional comments, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you again.
I've got just a couple of comments in regards to the apartment complex. And I know one of the things, one of the conditions was fire protection, and obviously that's my duty and my job. Couple of things in regards to that that I would like to see added to the conditions is some sort of plan for snow removal. I know when this first started, we had talked about, something in regards to, snow removal and what was gonna happen with that, or where what the plan was really for that. I'd like to see some sort of addition to that as well, on something to do with no parking in regards to the private drive.
Was that a condition already on the original?
No, I want it added.
Oh, I thought it was on the original, but it
Yeah,
had no parking.
I don't,
Okay.
I know it's something that you and I have talked about.
Yeah, no.
I don't know if it's actually been talked about
Yeah.
officially
Okay.
in this
Yep.
meeting, that's why I wanted to
Okay.
make sure it
Sure.
got brought up. one of the things from a safety standpoint, that I would recommend, and ultimately, obviously, it would have to come down to, city council, but I would recommend from a safety standpoint, from where the, parking exits onto Fifth, all the way to the north, that all be no parking, on the city street itself. I think that would help. I know, during the afternoons, I don't know quite as much during the morning, but during the afternoons, when school lets out, there's tons of cars that are parked there. I think that would help alleviate, some of that stress for, the residents coming in and out with some of the, or whether it be, that time frame, we do a right, right turn only kind of thing.
So we're on Fifth, from where to 16th?
So basically from where it would exit, the garage door,
That drive north.
to north to the
Maybe even
corner.
just part
I was
of
gonna
south
say,
of
I think maybe would it make even more sense to go from where the school entrance is, from the middle school
Yep.
entrance,
Yeah.
north? all the
Then it
way?
would clear it all up.
Maybe on both sides, too.
Yeah.
I mean, you still wanna leave some parking for overflow for folks who are going to the ball games, but at the same time,
Yeah.
most of them don't need to park on the street. I
No,
mean,
and-
Linda and I had even talked about, having to confirm that parking was allowed on Fifth, and if people do park there, don't know if that's ever really been clarified, because it is an overbuilt road, it's a wide road, but.
Yeah, in most city activities, there's not parking that far north. The ball fields are further south, even when there's busier things going on and ball games at the elementary school itself. Very rarely is it to the point where they would need to be, parked that far out.
I would say the only time is a baseball game.
And
You
the
know,
same-
Yeah,
Football
and-
game.
And
In
even,
sense, some of this burden needs to go back to the school, that if they don't have adequate parking for their,
Well, I think they have
events.
adequate parking,
Oh, okay.
it's that people don't
Convenience.
choose
The
to.
convenience factor with the
Yeah.
baseball games is the biggest one, not even
Right.
football so much.
Well,
Yeah.
Football might be overflow if there's
Right.
a playoff game, but
Yeah.
I think baseball, people just wanna be able to sit by the fence and
If-
park right there.
and even on your point, Joe, on Fifth, I would even, maybe make a recommendation even on 16th Street in front of the school, taking that parking away, because
The only no parking on 16th is right at the crosswalks.
I know, but
There's like a car
but they
and a
park
half
there
on
anyway,
each-
but I
on
think
each
we
side.
should make it even more no parking there to alleviate, so the kids would be able to see that crosswalk.
Well, I can't watch a baseball game when everybody parks there from my front porch, so yeah, that would be.
And these townhomes, if these townhomes go in, you won't be able to either, so. I don't know, that's the tough thing though, is parking on 16th Street, the city is giving up parking, and, that's, just a
Right.
concern that the council might have, I don't know,
And my thought was more for the
apartment complex.
apartment
Yep.
complex coming in and out. You
Well,
just giving
safety-wise,
Because that definitely, that's
Giving that a little bit more of a,
That would be
now
huge.
at that point, you're limiting it to pedestrians.
Yep.
And you're getting some of that block view from parking out of there.
Yep.
The other thing was more plan review for myself, and the fire department. I'd like to see, some, you've got the floor plans here, but I'd like to see some elevation plans too, myself. The height,
Sure.
the height of these is something that, I'm not overly concerned with, but it is a concern of mine, so, but, let me just see. Yeah, some of the other things are fire code stuff, and that's, you have to follow,
No.
so.
There will be a full site plan review.
Yeah.
We do as part of this.
But yeah, other than that, that was kind of some of the other thing would be parking. I would want to make sure, I think in the life cycle of us talking about this apartment complex, we've had several different, whether it's 30 or 32 or 34 or whatever, I'd like to see that pinned down to what we're actually gonna have.
There's a 1-to-1 under the building to the number of units in the building,
Yeah.
from that standpoint.
Yeah.
And then the surface parking, which is shown there, is,
Yep.
probably parking that could be used for the whole development, not necessarily just the apartment building, but from that standpoint.
But
And I think, Brad alluded to a lot of communities are going to a 1-to-1 on apartment buildings, just because you're not having two people living in an apartment building.
I wouldn't say one-to-one, that's
Okay.
tight.
Okay.
But they are reducing the standard.
Brad, what is the recommended ratio, would you say?
Well, right now, there was a note on it, 1 to 5. The recommended ratio, it's really hard to have a specific recommended ratio, but generally what we're seeing in the marketplaces is 1.25 to 1.5. And it varies based on all kinds of conditions and all kinds of scenarios. And often, like I said, we look to have some kind of alternative strategy, which is usually a proof of parking. In this case, we don't have any space for that, right? So the question is there some alternative solution? And the only alternative solution that I know of is you start to limit your tenants, and it's a property owner issue. That can be hard for the city to enforce, because you don't really have leverage. You can't, shut them down as an apartment. But it is something that is, if we have to be creative on it, we can create some kind of agreement. The recommendation, I would say, is 1.25 is the lowest you want to go, and I think with that surface parking lot, they're 1.31, I think, is what they've shown on their contests. But I've seen a couple different drawings in anywhere from 1.31 to 1.46 or something like that.
34 units are, 8 spots short with what the plan that we have here with the 10 surface lots and the one-to-one underneath. I think we're still about 8.
We're about 1.31 is what the current show is.
If there's no on-street parking, you do keep the parking headache as it pertains to this development, within this development. You can push it back on them and say, listen, guys, you've got a parking issue here.
Right. That would be my concern, if we didn't have no parking on the streets on Fifth for sure. I think you're going to get tenants that are gonna park on Fifth, right, even with the parking lot right there. They're still just from ease of walk to, some of those tenants that are gonna be right on that east end of the building. I think they're just gonna be able to
They'd have to have...
park there and walk in, so.
So the other solution, and I've never dealt with it with the school district, but it makes a lot of logic to it, is that they would be required to have a shared parking agreement with the school. So if you think about the parking demand for the school, it's during the day and during events. Parking demand for apartment complexes, morning, evenings, and maybe weekends, which majority of the time, school parking lots are empty. So another solution here could be that they negotiate a shared parking arrangement with the school district for excess parking.
Be tough in the snow seasons, because they plow it odd hours.
That's me, sure.
I see it.
Well, I'm not extremely concerned about the parking. It means that we have a slim ratio right now with what they show on the plans as 1.3. And we simply require that they have some kind of agreement with the school district for spillover parking. So if people start causing parking problems, we have a document we can point to that says you need to use those. And as soon as people get tickets, that'll change their behavior.
For the private drive that's down the center, because it is a private drive, correct? With that having no parking on it, how is the no parking on that enforced? Because on the other streets, they're public streets, so obviously that's...
On a private, you can't, the police have no...
Part of it is you're parking in front of somebody's driveway in the most part, outside of right next to the house that's there. So, I mean, you put up no parking signs and, there's an association that's tied in with this, so, people should be policing themselves to a certain extent.
That should be added to the association then.
Yeah, yep, so.
Even in their own private parking spot in there, if somebody parks that doesn't live there,
Right.
it's up to the development. The police have no say in it.
They'll still get the call, I'm sure.
They'll get the call, but they can't do 'cause it's a private parking lot, private, you know, and then the same with
It would
the,
have to be a resident that would have to call.
Yeah.
Because it's no different than when parking at the school. If you call, they don't care. If the school calls, then they have enforcement
Yes.
because it's a school property.
It's called being neighborly.
Nobody may know this, does the police enforce traffic on school property?
Only if the school calls them.
Okay.
Specifically.
Depends on traffic, I mean, if it's
Specifically
an
the
accident or
school.
something like this, yeah, they'll respond to that, but,
But parking violations, speeding violations, things of that nature, no, okay.
yeah, I mean, I guess you'd have to catch the person, you know, speeding violations of the parking lot, unlikely to catch them, but,
The idea
I
being...
mean, I think if there was something, I mean, if the police officer saw it, he's gonna respond to it, whether it's on school property or not. Otherwise, something long-term that's systemic, it comes from a complaint, that's complaint-driven.
Housing studies show that 30% of all houses are occupied by a single individual, whether that's or a single adult. So, and that's really the community that we're going after, is that single adult community in some fashion. And I think as Jamie has put forth that, you know, in Pine Island, very few people say, I want 2 stalls, so they end up with just 1, so.
We've had the public hearing, so we don't need to redo the public hearing, but we've got quite the list here between green space, snow removal, landscaping, we've got a utility easement in place. Do we want to see some of these things addressed before we actually further the conversation?
You just took the words out of my mouth.
So I guess my personal perspective would be that we get a little bit more feedback on the development and table this till the next meeting, unless there's strong opinions.
If I could give an opinion, one of the things that we are trying to do is address some of this in a timely fashion, so that, if it's best fit for the, storm sewer to go down this private drive, it can be addressed before the private drive gets built. At the moment, we're waiting to do the private drive until just after school. School is out, but that's kind of why we're trying to hit certain targets and dates. And Brad's aware of some things that we were trying to do, from that standpoint, so, I would be okay as a planning and zoning commissioner if these things were added in to it, and I can make sure that they are put in place before the meeting on the city council meeting, and all of that stuff is addressed.
So, the managing traffic, I think that's outside this.
Yeah.
Managing the parking can be a component of this. As far as the street parking, we've addressed the Fifth Avenue, I mean, that's a component of it. But that's, again, really doesn't fall on the PUD. You know, it falls on the city to make that decision. I think the electric easement, the green space, the landscaping, and then the stormwater, I mean, I'd like to make sure that those are all addressed before we move forward. I'm not opposed to the apartment at this point, if we can address these satisfactorily. But, I just want to see that, I just want to put too much of the cart in front of the horse. We've done that in the past and it's burned us.
When you talk about civil, that's a $20,000 investment that somebody needs to make. And that's why we're trying to go through the process, is to make sure that we get that addressed. Is this okay? Because then it changes all of the civil, you know, from that standpoint. We're trying to avoid spending that kind of money on something that we don't know that's gonna go through.
But that's not something that I can weigh into my decision.
Was there a motion in there, or one that I could coax out of you that embraces your thoughts?
Colin, you got any comments?
No, I think, you know, if I think the direction you're heading is to table it until the next meeting till we get these questions answered. And, I mean, it's a development that's gonna be there for a long time, so if it takes another month to get these answered, it's something that's gonna be there for a while.
So if I could just clarify the things that we need answered, and Dwayne, you tell me if I'm wrong on this, but it seems like the things we need answered are, one, a plan for the parking, two, figure out the open space, because right now, we don't know, we're just relying on the design to figure it out.
Yep.
Three, give some more thought to potentially the landscaping. Can landscaping be something that's a condition of approval, so that once they get their approvals, they can do a full landscape plan? And the same goes with the civil stormwater stuff. I guess those are the two that I think are the biggest hiccups. Then, there's also the dropping the Excel easement on there. I think there's a condition, if I heard conversation about some kind of signage or something that would be on site to notify drivers leaving the apartment, remember there's a trail there.
Snow removal?
Plan for snow removal.
Yep.
Which is a simple thing, I think, but, so really, it's the open space, it's the parking, those are the two primary things. We could probably do a little more on understanding 5th and 16th Street and the parking scenario, just to help people understand that better. That would be something the city would do, figure out that, and let the applicant deal with the open space and the parking.
Yeah, you've got it. I think we already had heard that our Public Works is working on that intersection. So let's see what they've got for a plan, how that impacts this. As you said, that external parking is an issue, and that could be just setting the hours that parking isn't allowed in certain areas. I parked in a 2-hour parking today in Rochester, and had to leave my job to move my car. So, I mean, there's ways around that parking management. But, yeah, it's the civil, if the city can get that completed, you know, I would be okay to make that a condition if we were to move forward. But it's the green space, the easement, I think are the two big ones that are holding me up at this point.
So then, if we were to get those items addressed, we would still have the civil and landscape full civil plans and landscape plans that would still be conditions. But we can address these other items, they would come back to the planning commission on May 9th, go to council then. We could, if we get all of that addressed, we could then go immediately to the council on the 11th.
Yep.
And, I mean, I'm not going anywhere. I would assume without a public hearing, there's no publication that would need to be done on...
We've already had the public
We've
hearing.
had the public hearing, so it's just taking action.
With that understanding, you would need 4 of us for a quorum?
That's right.
If we needed to call a special meeting to be a little bit more sensitive to timelines, I'm not against that. So I'm just throwing that out there as an option. If gotta beat a square peg in a round hole, let's beat a square peg into a round hole. Do we need to make a motion to table? Is that the process?
Yeah, that'd be what you
Yeah.
wanna do if you were gonna do that way.
Gotcha. If we're headed down that road, I guess I would still need a motion,
And
please.
and I think we have the direction we need, so just a motion to table allows staff to work with the applicant to get these other items addressed.
And if they can get addressed in a timely fashion, if there, you know, a special meeting is needed to be called, we can do that. So with all of this discussion and everybody have the same understanding, I'll move to table this until, this added information is acquired.
Have a motion to table, do we have a second? Second. Motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You would still be in an abstention from this conversation?
Yes.
sir? Okay, thank you. Item number 5, potential zoning change for billboard on Highway 14 Southwest.
So this is just informational, it came in really late last week, but I wanna just let you know that, we've been contacted. The parcel the city acquired that has a billboard already on it, on the south side of the Vale property along 14, there's a billboard there. We're working with the folks from Reagan, who have the billboard. We'll be looking at lease. They're interested also putting another one on the south side. So when 14 was redone, that sort of bisected that parcel, it created this little acre orphan lot on the south side that was in CRP. The city's not able to take advantage of CRP, so that's been bought out. The EDA's bought that out, so it's available. And we'd be looking at rezoning that to C3. Right now, it's ag. And when the folks from the billboard company prefer to have it in that C3, that's really the intended, that highway, anyways, just want to let you know that may be coming down the pipe. We'll be working with them, and Robert will be working with them from the EDA just to see if that makes sense. So, that's all I had on that.
Anything else anyone would like to discuss? Any update on fences?
I had a meeting with a resident who lives off of 57 there. We discussed it, and I'll be having another meeting with him and the Public Works Director up on site on the 2nd of May. Try to encourage him to move the fence, but right now they're looking at a 50% transparency, which would probably be super unattractive, but if it meets the criteria, I guess it meets the criteria, so.
How close is the new sidewalk?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Because it looked like he's pretty close, and if you're gonna be putting a 5-foot sidewalk in.
Yeah, and I'm, like I said, I'm gonna try and work with him to move it back as far as I feel like we can, even if it isn't precisely where we'd like it to be. Because what they're looking at right now is taking half of the slats off of the fence so that it's 50% transparent in the front, and the city attorney feels like that might meet the letter of the code. I don't know that would be a very attractive fence or a very sturdy one, so we'll try and work with them. But yeah, we do have a meeting with them on site on May 2nd, so.
Do we need to, ask Ronnie to contact Mr. Wilker to do his?
I already talked to Ronnie about that, and yeah, he is planning on taking his photos here, so we'll have that in the future packet, so.
Can't think of anything else.
I don't have anything else.
I don't think so, but.
If not, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you all again.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks, Brett.
Have a good evening, sir.
Can I keep this or no?
You
can keep that.
Public